Hi, this is Liv Morgan, and you are listening to No One Knows, a deep dive podcast into the mysterious death of JoAnn Matouk Romain.
Hi, all. It's been about a month since we've last checked in, and we've got a lot to go over. So let's dive in. If you aren't following us on our socials, now is probably the time that you should be there. In between the process of recording episodes and investigating, we have some new information. And if you were not on our Instagram and Facebook pages or not local with local news, you might not have seen. But there was a formal request that was sent in to the Attorney General's office. And since then and before, we've been slammed. Just as a reminder, you can always find us on Instagram at No One Knows Pod or Justice for JoAnn, and I'll link everything in the show notes below. Now, let's get to it. On March 20th, 2025, 15 years to the day, a formal request was sent in to Michigan Attorney General's office, Dana Nessel. Now, 15 years from what? It would be March 20th, 15 years ago, that JoAnn Matouk Romain's body was found in Canadian waters. Now, this formal request was sent in by attorney Steve Haney, whose name might ring a few bells if you're local. If you're local, you may have heard him, seen him on the news, but if you're not local and you listen to the podcast, you're going to notice that he was previously on our podcast and how he is helping JoAnn's children uncover the level of concerns in her case and the clear injustice that is going on. You'll recall a few episodes ago, we dove deep with him into the meeting that they had at the Michigan State Police and how they were really unwilling to dive into anything. Now, within 48 hours of that request being sent in to Dana Nessel's office, it was denied. But the biggest concern, it wasn't denied to the family or to the lawyer or anybody. It was only denied, and information was only given to local news. So what exactly was put inside this formal request that was sent over to Attorney General Dana Nessel? Why were they so quick to dismiss it? I'm here today. Let's break it down. We're going to start with a statement directly from Steve Haney in his response to how the office was quick to dismiss. It says, quote, "If they choose to ignore blatant evidence of murder, that is their cross to bear." End quote. So what is this blatant evidence that Haney is referring to? Now, if you follow us on social media, you will see that we did post a call for action. We asked all of our listeners and those that have been following JoAnn's story to please contact Attorney Dana Nessel's office and demand justice. I didn't follow up other than what the news had provided. The news basically came back and said, we received a call, a response from the office of Dana Nessel, and they told us that they were not going to further look into JoAnn Matouk Romain's death. Now, I want to talk specifically about what evidence was included in the document that was sent over to the Attorney General's office. This document includes the following items specified, highlighted for concern, and in the document, it would end up being around 14 pages. These areas specifically were discussed in great lengths with supporting evidence, documents, affidavits, reports, etc. So I want to break down these 14 areas that was included to give you a better idea of what exactly was sent over to them. These 14 items are as followed: witness reports and interviews, interviews from other individuals, police reports from both Grosse Pointe Farms and Grosse Pointe Woods police departments, the United States Coast Guard reports, crime scene photographs provided by the police, statements from JoAnn Matouk Romain's psychologist, statements from JoAnn Matouk Romain's family, Canadian reports, nautical charts, deposition transcripts of both civilian and law enforcement individuals, autopsy reports conducted by 3 separate occasions and 3 separate MEs, and then investigative findings provided by private investigators that were hired by the Romain family. The newest piece of evidence that was added that has never been talked about previously is the potential for DNA. You're probably wondering, Why are we just now coming to the conclusion of DNA 15 years later? And the simple answer is they're not. It's always been something that's been discussed and talked about and further pushed. But it's kind of simple if you think about it. JoAnn's family knew that something wasn't right to begin with, right from the start. But the severity of the cover-up was not directly apparent from day one. There's no way that they would know the level of corruption that would follow this case. They knew the extent of certain relationships and concerns, and most of these, all of them, were brought forward just in the first few days to law enforcement. But as the years of investigating, private attorneys, FOIA requests, and a lawsuit, the level of corruption that has been uncovered by JoAnn's children and all those who've helped along the way seemed to be so much more glaring now. I want you to just imagine for 1 second. You're sitting on a floor and you have a 20,000 piece puzzle, and all of the puzzle pieces are the same color with just the same type of design. You have your main four corners, and as you work on the puzzle, you continue to build on to the next section. Certain areas begin to meet, corners begin to connect. This is exactly the process of how JoAnn's cases happen. This wasn't a murder for money. This was a murder to cover up years of criminal activity. So as they're picking up these 20,000 piece puzzle, the story begins and the puzzle becomes more clear. JoAnn's children relied on detectives and officers within the Grosse Pointe Woods and Grosse Pointe Farms communities to do the jobs that they were sworn in to do. These are government jobs who are paid for by the taxes that a lot of you listeners probably pay. Now, ultimately, they not only failed the investigation, honestly, terribly, but the blatant abuse of power and lack of investigating shows an ill will not only towards JoAnn, but her children who are still fighting for her justice to be served through the law. Now, I want to go back to our first few episodes where we really dove into the process that the police took on that evening and how we are now at the point of DNA testing privately 15 years later, and how a request was just now sent in to the Attorney General's office and a denial was given only 48 hours later. First, if you recall, the vehicle that JoAnn was driving that evening was found parked in front of St. Paul's Catholic Church on the lake. That silver Lexus was registered to her daughter, Michelle Romain. Now, this is exactly where the problems begin. That evening, which is directly highlighted in the formal request that was sent to the Michigan Attorney General's office. This is a non-negotiable automatic lien system. It registered when the vehicle was ran and when it was deemed no action. But yet, an officer who has never been identified showed up to the home of JoAnn Matouk Romain and where her children were living, informing Michelle, Kelly, and Michael Romain that their mother, JoAnn Matouk Romain, was missing, despite the vehicle being registered to Michelle. This timeline is non-negotiable. The lien system automatically identifies what officer entered it into the system, what the vehicle was, and there's a timestamp on it. The lien that triggered the investigation is not the lien that was initially ran. So the timeline clearly shows that whoever showed up to JoAnn Matouk Romain's house had to have had prior knowledge that JoAnn was driving that vehicle and they knew that she would go missing. Second, the Lexus was moved. From sworn affidavits and eyewitness testimonies, individuals who not only went into the church but came out confirm no individuals were in that vehicle and that the car had been moved from its original parking spot. So, for example, JoAnn pulled in, parked in a spot, okay? When these individuals came back out, the last individuals who came out of the church that evening recall the car being moved to a completely different parking spot. In addition, the vehicle was seen to have completely left the parking lot altogether and then return, resulting in the vehicle being parked in a different location than initially. This is important because this completely contradicts the police investigation's timeline. This completely contradicts their entire process that JoAnn went to the church to pray and then walked into the water to commit suicide. Third, the vehicle was the center around JoAnn's disappearance. JoAnn's 6-week-old purse, which is now torn and tattered on its shoulder strap, was found abandoned in the front seat of the silver Lexus, but there were no sign of JoAnn, her keys, or her cell phone, meaning that whoever moved the car had to have had JoAnn's keys to do so. But let's not forget, it would be just weeks before that JoAnn's car keys and home keys would happen to go missing during an open house at her house. Lastly, the car was never correctly tested for DNA. Grosse Pointe police simply lack basic police practices, or they blatantly tried to destroy evidence. Either way, both should be a reason to be held accountable in court for not completing their due diligence. Now, we have spoken directly to many DNA officials on the silver Lexus that JoAnn was driving at the time that she went missing. Now, any type of department with a professional team should know the process to collecting attainable DNA off of any type of surface, specifically leather. Let's not forget that during this time, local PD contacted JoAnn's children, letting them know that when they attempted to do DNA fingerprinting on the vehicle, no other prints were found besides them and JoAnn's. JoAnn's children never gave any sort of DNA sample or fingerprint samples as comparison prints. They did not have government jobs. They had no information or any type of fingerprints on file that they could have in comparison to. So in the process of talking with all these DNA experts, we have talked to a lot of different ones. And when it comes down to it, a lot of these nonprofit organizations who work specifically on genealogy to help identify Jane or John Does were very honest with the information and basically told us what we could and could not do. This is where we began our search for finding a lab that would be able to give us an honest opinion on what and if any lab could provide testing 15 years later, whether that be on the purse, keys, her clothing that has been kept, or on the vehicle. Our best chances from any DNA expert is that it is the vehicle. Despite the years that have passed and a new owner, foreign DNA in the vehicle is detectable, whether that be hair, skin, fingerprints, or blood. So like any person would do, we began to track down the silver Lexus. It would be states away and a shocking call to the owners, a small explanation of what needs to be done, and they were on board with us. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, what does this have to do with the Attorney General? Now, this is where things can kind of start to get complicated, as if this case isn't already complicated enough. But during our many phone calls with DNA labs, the biggest concern is for the chain of command. Most DNA testing is requested through an agency, whether that be local police, prosecutor's office, or an attorney general's office. In JoAnn's case, that's not possible. The local police is corrupt. The biggest suspect and the person of JoAnn feared the most is an employee of the local prosecuting office, and all attempts within Wayne County Prosecutor's Office has been denied. We didn't put all of our bets on this Attorney General. We are quick to see how corrupt the entire Michigan judicial system is, but it's better to say you did than you never even tried. Despite the long list of evidence that we talked about in the beginning, the biggest red flag is that local police department's connection to the biggest people of interest in this case. Very people that JoAnn's children told police about in the days right after JoAnn went missing. But that's what kind of makes the response from the Attorney General's office and Dana Nessel even more concerning. Now, this isn't a response that they gave to any attorney or the family. A response was given to Channel 4 local news. And I'm going to give a short synopsis of it because it's very long-winded. But it basically says, I'm going to take snippets out of here. It says, the Michigan Department of Attorney General does not and cannot serve as a review agency at the disposal of private practice attorneys. It says that they have 83 independently elected county prosecutors, and the department could not manage or keep up with the volume of requests it would or should accept cases based on referral. And this was given to Local 4 by Press Secretary Danny Wimmer. Now, as of today, April 23rd, no one from the Michigan Attorney General's office or Dana Nessel herself has contacted the family or Steve Haney, who is the attorney for JoAnn Matouk Romain's family. The response to Local 4 from the children of JoAnn Matouk Romain reads as follows. Quote, the system is obviously very flawed. A federal judge overseeing this case stated the disputed facts in this case are very disturbing and today remain unsolved. The federal court, in addition, stated that the lawsuit we brought forward regarding a murder cover-up by 2 police departments was meritorious, meaning there is merit to us believing this was covered up by the police. This is a case of a murder cover-up, and the holding authority, Grosse Pointe Woods and Grosse Pointe Farms police departments, are involved in covering it up. How could we ever expect these corrupt police departments to formally ask the Attorney General's office to investigate themselves, which is what we are asking? We are not just looking for my mom's murder to be investigated. We are asking for the police departments and the intentional cover-up of this investigation to be investigated. This entire situation is more than disturbing, and we will not stop until we get justice." End quote. From the family of JoAnn Matouk Romain. So where do we go from here? We go to the top.